It's Monday, March 23rd, 2026. Iran keeps justifying Operation Epic Fury, drones over military bases again, and putting ice on TSA. Next on the AM Update. About 1 month ago today, President Trump said this.
They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America. After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons.
President Trump made those comments during the State of the Union address on the 24th of February. On the 25th of February, Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi said, we're not making any sort of weapon, no missiles that can go beyond 2,000 kilometers. Lies again, as the Islamic Republic, what's left of their command and control structure, launched missiles aimed at Diego Garcia. That would be the United States base, or at least used by the United States to carry out military operations in the middle of the Indian Ocean, about 4,100 kilometers away. Those attacks failed for various reasons, but it shows the most recent example of lies from Iran and their capabilities were maybe a little bit greater than anybody expected, except for maybe President Trump, as we heard just last month during the State of the Union address. Once again, Iran justifying Operation Epic Fury yet again, displaying that they have missiles that could reach basically any singular base or target in Europe and maybe on their way to the United States as well. Also, Iran was able to get through air defenses in Israel as they attempted to target various locations. Really, it's no targeting. It's just kind of a buckshot when it comes to missiles. It resulted in injuries and death yet again. And here's Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying the last 48 hours of this conflict just proves why it had to happen sooner rather than later.
If anyone needed an explanation of why Iran is the enemy of civilization and the enemy and the danger to the entire world, you got it in the last 48 hours. In the last 48 hours, they fired a terror weapon on civilians, on children. There's a children's nursery here. There's an old person's home here. Civilians, families, they fire terror weapons on civilians, and often they use cluster bombs, which are forbidden by international law. The second thing that they did is that they fired on Jerusalem right next to the holy places. They sent ballistic missiles that could have destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Western Wall.
There's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying, again, just over the weekend, we witnessed more examples of why this conflict with the Iranian regime had to go down sooner than later. The U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, added in this regarding the attempted attack on Diego Garcia.
I can tell you that UK just condemned the firing of an intermediate range ballistic missile at Diego Garcia. Mm-hmm. That same type of missile Iran has lied about in terms of its development and said they were not developing, yet they just lied. Yet they just did it. Not only could it hit Diego Garcia, it could hit capitals in Europe. And Margaret, the technology, the booster technology that Iran has been hiding behind its space program, I don't think we're going to see Iranian astronauts on the moon anytime soon. That this space program has been hiding that technology. You have the reentry technology. To marry the two really doesn't take very much. In terms of technological development. And we just have to, thank God the president is taking action now and stopping this march towards a fully fledged nuclear program instead of waiting until after it's developed, like we saw North Korea under the Clinton administration say, surprise, we now have a full program.
U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, repeating that message. It was bound to happen sometime, now better than later, this attack on Iran. So where are we now? President Trump continues to give disconcerting signals for various reasons, trying to calm markets, trying to calm political fears, trying to really, I think, trying to call out Iran's military capabilities, how far they're willing to go. That was on full display over the weekend as well. He posted this on Truth Social to begin, quote, "We're getting very close to meeting our objectives as we consider winding down our great military efforts in the Middle East with respect to the terrorist regime of Iran, completely degrading Iranian missile capability, launchers, and everything else pertaining to them, destroying Iran's defense industrial base, eliminating their Navy and Air Force, including anti-aircraft weaponry, never allowing Iran to get close to nuclear capability, protecting at the highest level our Middle Eastern allies, including Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, and others. The Hormuz Strait will have to be guarded and policed." So there's Trump in one message saying we're very close to our military objectives, again trying to calm maybe markets and political realities. And then he posted this as well on Saturday evening, quote, "If Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time," if you're listening to this on Monday, that would be about 5 p.m. or so this evening Eastern time, "the United States," Trump says, "of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first." So an escalation there. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent went through the car wash, it seemed like, on Sunday morning shows, saying that escalation may be necessary for de-escalation, and he added in this as it pertains to the Strait of Hormuz.
Again, what we have done, there has been a campaign to using military assets to soften up the Iranian fortifications along the strait. That's going to continue until they are completely demolished. And Kristen, let me tell you, whether it's this network or the mainstream press, the American people do not have good framing what is going on here. If you were to read what is happening, and I'm sure when Senator Murphy is on, he has come out and said we are losing the war. That is wrong. We have demolished the Iranian capabilities. Their Air Force is completely destroyed, Navy destroyed, and every day we are taking out their missiles, their missile systems, and the factories that build those missiles. And now the General Kane, Secretary Hegseth are leading a campaign to destroy all the fortifications along the Straits of Hormuz.
I hope they are successful in their operation now, targeting the Strait of Hormuz. It seems like maybe, just maybe, European quote-unquote allies are starting to get their heads out of their you-know-whats and considering sending assets to the Middle East, as some have already started to do quietly. Back at home, a drone sighting that temporarily raised alarms at one of the United States Air Force's largest and most strategic airfields earlier this month was more extensive and potentially more dangerous than first reported. This is a story from ABC News. Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana said it was under a shelter-in-place order March 9th after a report of an unmanned aerial system operating over its installation. The sighting raised concerns because Barksdale, of course, houses long-range B-52 bombers and plays a critical role in command and control of the Air Force nuclear defense capabilities. The shelter-in-place order was lifted later that day, but the unauthorized drone flights continued for nearly a week. Captain Hunter Rininger of the 2nd Bomb Wing said in a statement provided to ABC News, quote, "Barksdale Air Force Base detected multiple unauthorized drones operating in our airspace during the week of March 9th. The additional drone incursions had not been previously reported. That is concerning indeed. We've got all of these drones apparently flying unencumbered over certain military assets here in our own skies over the United States of America. That is a new frontier of warfare. And I'm sure that the United States will have solutions sooner than later, but it is concerning nonetheless. President Trump over the weekend as well, addressing the ongoing ridiculous lines at various airports, TSA security screening lines at various airports over the last week or two because of the Democrats' shutdown of the TSA amidst the DHS ongoing broader shutdown. They refused to fund the DHS and therefore TSA. President Trump addressed those long lines, saying he's going to stick Immigration and Customs Enforcement on various airports to help get those lines moving again. Tom Homan, White House border czar, said plans are already in the works and could be happening later this week.
Put together a plan today, and we'll execute tomorrow.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions here. First of all, are ICE agents even remotely trained to handle security at airports?
ICE agents receive a high level of training. And, the ICE agents are assigned at many airports across the country already. They do a lot of criminal investigation on smuggling at airports. But, there's got TSA agents covering exits, people that enter through the exits. Certainly a highly trained ICE law enforcement officer can cover an exit, makes people don't go through those exits.
Tom Homan, border czar, saying plans are already in the works to deploy additional ICE agents to various airports to hopefully get those TSA lines moving. When we come back, AI going too far once again. Also, Kathy Hochul begs for billionaires to come back to her state of New York, and Tucker Carlson goes full CCP. That's coming up next. We now go to the Georgia Supreme Court, where earlier this week, Justice Peterson, that would be Supreme Court Justice on the Georgia Supreme Court, pressed a state attorney named Deborah Leslie over her citations to cases that apparently don't exist. Listen to this exchange.
So before you sit down,
Yes,
there's
sir.
one more thing I need to ask you about, unfortunately. In reviewing the trial court's order denying the motion for new trial, there are at least 5 citations to cases that don't exist. And there's at least 5 more citations to cases that do not support the proposition for which they're cited, including 3 quotations that don't exist. My understanding is that you prepared the order for the denial order for the trial court. Were those citations in the version of the order that you submitted to the trial court?
No, Your Honor, I do not believe so. They were not. I did prepare an order. That order was revised.
So those non-existent cases were cited in your initial brief opposing the motion for new trial.
Your Honor, I'm not aware of that, but I would be glad to research that and provide the court with a supplement.
Okay, we'll get a briefing order out directing.
Unbelievable. That is a state attorney in the state of Georgia, Deborah Leslie, being confronted by a Georgia Supreme Court justice, basically saying, it wasn't said there explicitly, but reading between the lines, this state attorney likely used something like ChatGPT or Grok or another AI chatbot in order to prepare legal proceedings, which resulted in citations from cases that don't exist and quotations from cases that don't exist. Now, in this case, it's a good thing that it's just a state attorney and not a judge who's using ChatGPT or something like that. It was around this time last year. We were still largely in the early days of exploring AI and what it meant. People were like me, were just starting to get into some of the chatbots and things like that. And I had an idea for a series that I didn't follow through on because life gets busy. I only have so much time to devote to this podcast. And the first episode, actually, I did make one episode. It aired around this time last year. And I was going to kind of do thought experiments, thought exercises on various aspects of how AI, at least the chatbots, could be used and abused. And one of the episodes that I was going to do is, at this time, when I had this idea, we hadn't had stories like this. I was going to think of something just ridiculous, like, man, what if they used chatbots to write, judgments? What is the legal sphere going to do with the proliferation of AI chatbots? Boy, howdy. Well, I've seen no fewer than like a dozen of these types of stories just in the legal sphere alone. Using AI, faulty AI, to prepare legal proceedings. Just ridiculous. Let's go to the state of New York, where Governor Kathy Hochul has a message for billionaires who have fled her state.
And being conscious of the facts that I need people who are high net worth to support the generous social programs that we want to have in our state. Right? Now, there are some patriotic millionaires who stepped up. Okay, cut me the checks. I mean, just if you want to be supportive, but maybe the first step should be go down to Palm Beach and see who you can bring back home, because our tax base has been eroded. So I philosophically don't have a problem. It is like I have to look at the fact that we are in competition with other states who have less of a tax burden on their corporations and their individuals. And I would say remote work changed everything. There were people who could only work in an office in Manhattan or work in New York State, and they were captives to our state. They were going to stay. We saw that that's not the case. I mean, Wall Street businesses looking at Texas, they're not going there because they have a nicer governor. I know that for sure. But they're going there because of the tax rate. We have to be smart about this.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul lamenting the millionaires and billionaires and other high net worth individuals who have fled her state, lamenting the fact that she no longer can keep people, quote, and this is her quote, captive because of the proliferation of remote work. Maybe, just maybe, instead of lamenting the fact that these billionaires have left your state for greener pastures abroad in the rest of the United States, maybe, just maybe, start to think, hey, these quote unquote generous social programs were always going to be insolvent. Maybe, just maybe, if you want those people to come back, maybe you should actually look at, reality and making your state more solvent and more attractive. But that's not the priority. People like Kathy Hochul, if they had their druthers, they would, by gunpoint, force some of these millionaires and billionaires back into their state. If they could, just to force them to be captive, as she said, and pay huge chunks of their salaries in order to fund these social programs, in order to reward the people who largely vote for Democrats. Anyways, that's how they think. It's how they always think it's inherently destructive. America first means ceding power to Beijing, Iran, and Russia. Tucker Carlson, not only did he have some quote-unquote professor on from Beijing, he also did an interview with The Economist where he said the following. Listen to this.
We can no longer be the sole author of terms, of commerce, of anything. We have to share power.
With China.
Of course, because of their scale.
Tucker Carlson saying that no, even in the midst of the United States and their operation to kidnap, take into custody Nicolas Maduro, a head of state. We did that like 2 months ago. In the midst of the United States striking no fewer than, I think the number is now 8,000 targets, half a world away in Iran, and completely obliterating, we think, Iran's capacity to project strength outside of their borders. In the midst of, now it's like Operation Midnight Hammer, like every single day with the B-2 bombers flying those missions. In the midst of all of that, imagine saying, no, we got to live in a multipolar world and share power with China and Russia and Iran. Imagine saying that after all of this. And by the way, I'm somebody who was starting to think that it's not going to be a good thing, but maybe, just maybe, we're in a position now in the United States where it might just be a multipolar world where we kind of take care of our own hemisphere and other powers abroad can take care of theirs. It's not exactly a great thing for the United States, but I thought maybe that's just the reality we're living in. Now I'm seeing the ability of the United States to project power and project it hard elsewhere around the world. And the jury is still out on Iran, but we've got results. We've got results elsewhere. Imagine saying that after seeing all of this. And of course, Tucker Carlson blames Israel for not allowing us to live in this multipolar world. Just absolutely broken-brained nonsense. Well, Victor Davis Hanson went on Fox News, and he provided an assessment of where we are in the conflict with Iran. And I think it summarizes even better than I could how I view this, how I approach the progress I think that's being made in Iran. Because you can't just look what's being told by your own governments, by other governments like Israel. You want a little bit more context for forming your opinions, for forming your outlook on how things are going. And I think Victor Davis Hanson here in about 60 seconds does a wonderful job providing that context, not just from we think the facts on the ground, but from what others are saying in the region. Listen to this.
There's enough evidence to see how things are really going. Europeans would never agree to go anywhere near Iran unless they thought the tide was turning and they think that we're going to win. Otherwise, they would keep still. And the reason that the petro-nations of the Gulf survive is they have their finger in the wind and they're very attuned to the climate. And when you have Al Jazeera praising the United States bombing campaign and saying that it's been underestimated and it's brilliant and effective, you get the feeling that they think not only should the United States finish the job, but it can and will finish the job. And then when you start to see tactical aircraft like Warthogs and Apaches, that means that they're offering almost ground and sea support to hit targets. There's no defense at all when you have that type of aircraft flying at will in Iranian airspace. So you put it all together, and I think it's pretty clear that this rope-a-dope strategy that they have, that we're going to tire before they are, is dependent on just public opinion, the midterms in the United States. And if Trump sees it through, and I think he will, I think they're going to fall pretty soon. And
Victor Davis Hanson providing some more context to viewing the facts of the battle. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, did confirm that A-10 Warthogs are strafing the Strait of Hormuz. This is a type of aircraft that you don't put in the air, especially at low altitude, unless air defenses from the Iranians have been so degraded. So that's a fact. That shows you there is progress. That shows you there is a lack of ability to defend against such things. So that's something that's verifiable. You don't put in those types of aircraft. Al Jazeera, based in Qatar, as Victor Davis Hanson, and I think I had this story last week in AM Update, Al Jazeera